Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Quadruple D, a show within a show in the Critical Weight Theory podcast. So, tonight I'm talking about Howard Lutnick and his little Epstein testimony. So, I don't know why I said tonight because it's actually morning as I record this, but whatever. Let's move past it. So, questions surrounding wealthy elites and their long running connections to Jeffrey Epstein continue to expose how insulated political and financial power can be from public accountability. So, on Wednesday or yesterday, the 6th of May in 2026, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, or Nutlick as some people call him derisively, well, anyway, he gave closed door testimony before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee as part of Congress's expanding investigation into Epstein's network and the people who remained associated with him after his 2008 conviction. So the committee interview follows the Justice Department's release of millions of pages connected to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And these files include emails, calendar entries, and business records, and a whole lot of other stuff. And some of that indicates that Lutnick stayed in contact with Epstein years after Epstein pleaded guilty in Florida to soliciting prostitution from a minor. And the case highlights a recurring pattern in capitalist power structures. Extreme wealth often creates overlapping social, financial, and political networks that shield influential people from scrutiny long after ordinary people would face consequences. And of course, some of those consequences would be relatively severe compared to what a lot of these rich people would face. So Lutnick previously claimed he and his wife had cut ties with Epstein around 2005 after visiting Epstein's Manhattan mansion and finding the environment disturbing. So I'm going to get more into that in a little bit here because I mean it's a little bit silly what he said when it comes to that. However, documents later released by federal investigators appear to contradict that account, and he has actually admitted that, well, actually, I did have a relationship with Epstein beyond that. I'll get into that a little bit as well. You know, records described by several news organizations show communication continuing well after Epstein's conviction, including evidence of business dealings and social contact into the 2010s. During a Senate hearing earlier this year, Lutnick acknowledged that he visited Epstein's private island in 2012 with his family and another couple. He told senators the trip involved a lunch visit and said his wife, children, and nannies were present. Now, why would you bring your children to an underage sex trafficker uh, island? I don't know. I don't know. It's it's not a place where, well, I don't have kids, but if I did, I would think I probably wouldn't want them there, you know? But apparently Howard Lutnick did. And Epstein's Caribbean estate, Little St. James in the U.S. Virgin Islands, has been repeatedly identified in court filings and survivor testimony as one of the central locations tied to his sex trafficking operation. You know, he had other locations as well, including a ranch in Arizona that is called Zorro Ranch, and apparently there are attempts to investigate that at the moment. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But anyway, Lutnick has not officially been accused of participating in Epstein's crimes. So, not yet anyway. We'll see if anything ever happens there. And lawmakers from both parties have questioned why influential figures continued associating with Epstein after his conviction. Although I do have to say it's only a handful of lawmakers, and former Republican lawmakers like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example. Um, it's weird that I have to say this, but this is one of the issues that actually made Marjorie Taylor Greene have the fallout with Trump. Like, she's actually bashing Trump at this point in time, which I wouldn't have actually predicted, you know? And what's crazy about that is that it actually seems genuine. Like, I don't want to give Marjorie Taylor Greene credit for anything. You know, I have sort of a natural instinct to do that, but from what I've heard her say, it sounds like she's actually being genuine in her rejection of Trump that's going on at the moment. And a lot of that seemed to have come from what Trump told her regarding Epstein. That I mean, he said that he doesn't want to go after uh, people who are friends of his. So Marjorie was like, no, 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 I'm not going to be somebody who's going to sidestep this issue. And also, when Marjorie Taylor Greene was telling Trump about the death threats that she was receiving because of what Trump was saying about her, that she was a traitor, well, Trump said that she deserved the death threats and that her children do as well. I don't know how many children she has. Might just be one child. I don't know. But anyway, like, that would be a reason to distance yourself from Trump if he seems to revel in the idea of you receiving death threats. And all to protect, the sex traffickers and the beneficiaries of sex trafficking, including probably Donald Trump himself. So the broader scandal demonstrates how elite circles in finance, politics, and business frequently normalize relationships with abusive figures as long as wealth and access remain useful. And the committee session itself, you know, uh, is not public. It's instead lawmakers conducted a transcribed interview behind closed doors with a written transcript that is expected to be released later. Maybe it's already been released. I actually didn't see any headlines about that this morning, so I don't know if they've even released it yet. But it's the same format that was used in other recent Epstein-related congressional interviews. And committee chair James Comer previously said Lutnick agreed voluntarily to cooperate with investigators. Well, look who's in charge of any prospective investigations at the moment. It is Donald Trump's DOJ. In fact, I'm surprised that they were able to get any Epstein files out whatsoever, but I guess Donald Trump's power is not that vast yet that he could not totally derail the release of the Epstein files or anything like that. I mean, I don't know exactly how to explain what's going on with that, but there has been some incriminating stuff that's come out, but no prosecutions yet. And again, if you were engaging in this sort of behavior and you weren't a millionaire or a billionaire, you'd probably be up shit's creek without a paddle. But if you can buy the government or rent the government, you can avoid accountability. So this incentivizes perverts to get up close and personal with the Trump regime and just say, hey, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. And that's happened with pardons. He's pardoned so many different fraudsters. He pardoned the Honduran president who was a drug trafficker. He's convicted of trafficking hundreds of tons of cocaine into the country. So if you have enough money, you can sort of buy yourself a pardon, get yourself out of prison potentially. Anyway, a spokesman for the Commerce Department defended Lutnick ahead of the interview, saying he intends to answer questions directly and he dismissed what, or they dismissed what the department called inaccurate and baseless claims surrounding the controversy. So you have to wonder what exactly is meant by that. Which claims are inaccurate and baseless? So far, I think the main claim here is just that he had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein had, been successfully convicted. And, that's not a baseless claim. That's actually accurate. But anyway, Howard Lutnick, here's the funny part. Funny part, um, when it comes to when he distanced himself from Lutnick, or the claim that he distanced himself from Epstein. I mean, I said Lutnick twice. But anyway, Howard Lutnick said he was weirded out by Epstein's massage table, saying he never wanted to speak with Epstein again after hearing Epstein say he gets massages every day, which seems like he was overcompensating to look good to the public. Obviously, a person saying that they get massages every day is in itself not necessarily that weird of a thing. It's, people can get massages without it necessarily involving anything that creepy, unless you're weirded out by massages in general. Like, I don't really like massages that much. I don't really need I've never gotten a massage done professionally, and especially not like this type of massage that Epstein was famous for. But the point is, it's not necessarily that weird of a thing. So it's like Lutnick was protesting too much. He kind of made it like a comical thing almost by sort of smearing massages in general. Um, but Lutnick, in that 2025 interview, he described being disgusted by his 2005 tour of Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse. And remember, he was actually Epstein's neighbor. So he specifically mentioned that massage table, and Lutnick claimed this encounter led him to cut off social, professional, and philanthropic ties, which is now disputed by the released DOJ records indicating a 2012 visit to Epstein's Island. That was revealed in a recent House Oversight Committee testimony as well. So, that's a bit of an oversight on his part. Like, whoopsie, I said I wouldn't speak to him again, yet I traveled, all the way over to his island, which was a known sex trafficking hub. And, the massage table comment, it's a little bit goofy, that 2005 tour. So according to Lutnick, he and his wife were given that tour of Epstein's NYC home, and they saw that massage table surrounded by candles. And Lutnick alleged that when asked how often he got a massage, Epstein replied every day, before adding, and the right kind of massage. Like, okay, really, that sounds like uh, a thing that he might have actually said. I don't know, but it sounds like it's a little detail he added to sort of, I guess, wink at people and say this is what a pervert would say. And Lutnick interpreted this as suggestive, and it was a disgusting comment hinting at a blackmail mechanism. So it prompted him to claim he would never be in the room with that person again. So I don't know how he got like the person to confess right then and there that it was the right kind of massage. Um, but that's something that I don't believe actually happened like that. And of course, he was lying anyway because he said, "Oh, I never talked to him again, or I never had meaningful uh, interactions with him again." So there's the public claim versus the private actions. Lutnick previously stated he stopped all interactions in 2005. However, Like I said, the Justice Department files showed, and Lutnick later confirmed that he visited Epstein's Island in 2012, long after Epstein's 2008 sex offender conviction. So I guess it was an inexplicable visit. Like I just wound up there. Maybe Lutnick was kidnapped himself and just whisked away to the island. I don't know. How do you mysteriously end up on an island after you said, "Oh, I'm never going to talk to this person again"? And how do you convince your family to go and to bring a nanny and all that kind of stuff? So, in the May 2026 House Committee hearing, Lutnick was accused of being evasive, of course, stating he could not recall why he took his family for lunch on the island. That's kind of silly, isn't it? Like, how many times have you sort of mysteriously wound up on an island and you don't even remember why you went there? Like was he hit over the head with a hammer? You know, was there hypnosis involved? Like how do you like suddenly, oh, I appeared on an island? Maybe a wormhole opened up and it swallowed his whole family and their nanny or whatever, and wow, I'm somehow on Epstein's island all of a sudden. Weird. It's like it's really something that would require a Rod Serling narration, like something straight out of the Twilight Zone. Maybe that's similar to Donnie Darko. What happened to him? The whole story there. Um, it's all very mysterious, and I don't think this House Oversight Committee stuff is going to truly get to the bottom of this interdimensional wormhole mystery of how Lutnick wound up on this island. But inquiring minds want to know. And what about the ongoing business ties? Further investigation showed business dealings between Lutnick and Epstein lasting years after the 2005 incident. Whoops, it's like maybe he was hypnotized again. I don't know. I guess I guess the mystery just keeps on getting deeper and deeper here. How do you even explain that? I don't know. I've never accidentally had business dealings sort of randomly emerge out of the ether, and I didn't remember how it happened the next day. Like, oh man, suddenly I've got like a business venture that I'm a part of, and I don't remember signing up for it. I better consult a doctor or a psychiatrist or I guess a reverse hypnotist to dehypnotize me, and maybe the truth will unravel, and I can finally understand how I keep having these mysterious business dealings show up in my life just randomly. you know, that's a strange scenario to be a part of for sure. And what about the blackmail claims? Like, Lutnick has frequently described Epstein as the greatest blackmailer ever, suggesting to the New York Post that the massage sessions were likely recorded to leverage power over elites. Well, I mean, how would he know that unless he knew Epstein pretty well? I mean, that's something that the casual person on the sidelines, not really paying attention to Epstein, that's not something they would necessarily know or logically deduce. Like if you're Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo, you're not necessarily going to understand that, these are blackmail mechanisms. But somebody who's been there and done that, well, they might understand, and they might make that a regular talking point. And you also have to wonder, well, if he knew that, then why did he go back to the island again? It's all very convoluted and contradictory. Like, if I knew that somebody was going to blackmail me, like, if I was well aware of this and intensely creeped out by the guy, I would go to the press, like, right away and say, hey, this person's got this sex trafficking island. He's got these weird massage things that he does and this sex island, and I mysteriously wound up there, and I don't know how I got there, and I've somehow got these weird business dealings with this guy that I don't remember how they happened. Well, let's get to the bottom of this. I'd be talking to the press about that, and it'd be like it would be, I would think, a very reassuring thing that people out there in the public and the media and all these different interests would finally understand that, hey, I'm on the right side of history here. I'm trying to go after this criminal, this sex pest, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of why all these mysterious things keep happening to me. It's like all these wormholes open up and I'm just suddenly whisked away to this bizarre criminal island over here. I would want some answers to why that keeps happening. And the House Democrats, including Representative Madeline Dean, have argued that Lutnick's disgusted narrative about that massage table was a public relations attempt to overcompensate for his actual prolonged relationship with Epstein, as shown in the recent congressional testimony. So the Epstein investigation has increasingly widened beyond the crimes of one individual and toward the broader institutions that enabled him. And Epstein received a highly controversial non prosecution agreement in 2008 from federal prosecutors in Florida, which, keep in mind, is a very red state and probably was red enough even back in 2008. And anyway, that sweetheart deal allowed him to avoid federal sex trafficking charges and serve a short jail sentence with extensive release privileges. And that agreement later became a symbol of how the American legal system often treats billionaires, and I would say 100 millionaires as well. Let's not leave them in the cold. Let's not pretend that they always receive the cruelest treatment. I'm sure if you got a couple 100 million, the Trump people and the Epstein people out there would have your ear. They'd be interested in what you have to say. I mean, if you have less than 100 million, though, I don't know. You're possibly more frozen out if you don't have the right stuff to get involved with this creepy crew. But anyway, the billionaires and the politically connected figures, they're sort of treated differently from everyone else. So, from an anti authoritarian perspective, like mine, the continuing revelations reinforce these criticisms that state institutions and concentrated wealth tend to protect one another, even in cases involving systemic abuse and exploitation, and even when that exploitation involves children sometimes. So, Lutnick, I wonder if he'll ever get to the bottom of the mystery of why he had these weird extended relationships and these weird visits and these weird business dealings with with this known criminal. You know, I think that the mystery must run deep, and the amnesia probably is a serious problem. I hope he gets some treatment for that. I know it could be a serious problem. You might not want to operate heavy machinery if you're severely brain damaged and you have severe memory loss. Like, maybe it will impact him in his daily life and his daily routines. I don't know. But what would regularly harm a regular mind might be seen as beneficial to somebody in the Trump administration. The more damaged you are, the more deranged and just flawed you are personality wise and intellectually, the more you might fit in with the Trump regime.